Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's Lisa Nirell, and welcome to this week's edition of the Mindful Marketer Livestream. Today, I am joined by Stefan Kaplan, my producer, and we're looking forward to a great session with you today. So let me get started. First of all, I have some interesting news that I came across this morning. One of the dozens of publications that I read on a weekly basis is the Wall Street Journal. And if any of you didn't see this today, section B, it says heavy demand swamps chip makers. Well, when I saw that, I realized the timing of our session today is impeccable. And the point that the article makes is that so many chip makers are falling behind. They cannot meet customer expectations because of the explosion of demand for laptops and smartphones and other devices. So they are at a very important turning point of maintaining customer loyalty, maintaining profit margins in a time where there's too much demand. Now, you might say that's a first world problem, but it's a problem nonetheless. And today, that's why I'm very happy that soon we'll be joined by Drew Boyd, who will help us unpack some of the things you need to know to prepare for the post-COVID boom by improving your customer retention. So remember, too, that if you do have to dash sometime before we close off the session today at 2:10 p.m. Eastern, we're going to be together for the next 40 minutes. But if you have to leave early, remember that you can always sign up for our newsletters and our free replays. And Stefan has shown you there how you can connect with me. So let me tell you about my conversations with Drew and why we put this program together for you today. We met actually through the LinkedIn Learning community. When I found out that Drew probably wins the award for the most number of courses on LinkedIn Learning. I think he has at least 43 different courses and videos available on all things innovation and marketing. He also is the author of several books. His newest one, Adding Prestige to Your Portfolio, offers dozens of planning models and strategies to help you retain your best clients and attract what he likes to call luxury level customers, because there will be a post-COVID boom, and it's up to you to make it worth your customers' while to stick with you. So we're going to take your live questions as well throughout the session, and we want to know where you're from. So please put in the comments now where you're from, and we'll be talking again with you soon. So without further ado, Drew, welcome to the live stream.
Hi, Lisa. Nice to see you.
Well, it's great to see you too. Where does this conversation find you today?
I'm in my home office in Cincinnati, Ohio, and it's bitter cold here and rainy. Just one of those nasty days, I'm afraid to say.
Yes, well, we won't let winter cast a negative pall over what we're going to be talking about today, because there is an economic boom coming. We're seeing that the vaccines are starting to take shape. There's true optimism everywhere I look. So we want to help people today figure out some strategies to hold on to their great customers or find more great customers who are profitable. Do you find anything right now that's going on? You're a professor, a C-suite advisor, and a multi-time author. When you're talking to B2B companies, many of whom follow me here on LinkedIn Live,
right?
Do you find that there are things they're doing right now that makes them really vulnerable to losing customers?
So I love this topic. You picked definitely one of my favorite topics on customer retention. And I say that because if you were to just get one single number about a company to kind of indicate what that company is about, I would ask for the retention rate. What is your rate of retention? Which, if people, just to be clear about what that means, all that means is if you had 100 customers at the end of the year, how many of those 100 customers stay with you for the next period of time? Not counting the new ones that you add, just out of that 100, what was your erosion down, that retention rate? Because retention rate, it's the single best number to indicate the health of the company. A high retention rate tells you that the company focuses on it, makes it a priority. A low retention rate or a declining retention rate tells you right away the company is having problems. So I like the companies that are focused on that. I think what's true about the current crisis, we've had numerous crises, financial, economic, political. This is a health crisis, just one more crisis, crisis du jour. But it's forcing companies to stop and pause and think about, what do we do? And what I tell them is, hey, focus on, charity starts at home. Focus on retaining what you have. Hold on to what you have, by God, because if you don't, you're going to see significant changes throughout the year because you didn't anticipate it.
Right. And what about some other factors that people maybe are ignoring that are on their dashboard that maybe they have neglected during COVID, but might need to revisit?
Yeah, I think there was so much of because of the way the pandemic forced people to separate, to go digital, to go virtual like we are here. It put people's head online a lot more, their attention span more online, and so especially from B2C companies like Coke, and they're always communicating so effectively to what their audience wants to see online. It's the B2B companies that really needed to step up. Let me look at healthcare, for example. Healthcare is an industry I spend a lot of time with. I'm working today on some projects, but they are panicked because they just hadn't had the channels in place, the routines in place to reach this multitude of customers in a multitude of ways. And so you take a company like Eli Lilly. It reaches oncology, it reaches doctors that treat diabetes, it reaches different specialists, right? And those, each of those specialties had different patterns of communication, different channels. Well, all of a sudden, that's all off the table. And now Lilly has to figure out how to immediately start communicating with those multitude of specialties through non-traditional ways. And they were, I'll be honest with you, they were slow to embrace it. A lot of them are just now coming around, thinking this would all blow over. It hasn't. It's gonna.
Well, if they're that slow, they may fall asleep at the wheel when we see Walmart and Amazon become the next providers, become the next aggregators of whole person healthcare. I mean, the big prediction from Scott Galloway is that Apple is going to buy Peloton, and Apple could become Eli Lilly's potential competitor in terms of how they deliver in the value chain. So they've got to, they have no choice but to learn how to act quickly and adapt quickly.
So I've always followed 5 companies very closely. Books have been written about these 5. And I was always fascinated by these 5 because of the vicious competition that's going on between them right now. And it wouldn't surprise anybody to find out which 5 they are: Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, and Microsoft. But if you stop and step back and think about what you have is 5 companies in different industries. You have a social network, an online retailer, a search engine, a lifestyle computing company, and a software server company. Now, guess what they're all competing for? They're competing for your soul.
Oh, that sounds so ominous, Drew.
It is. Those 5 companies want a footprint in all of our lives, in every aspect of our life. And look at what they've covered now. Google covers so much of your life today, and it's gotten into Nest, and it's gotten into other ways to reach just the daily aspects of your life, your your not just your online activity, but your home health, your home comfort, your driving, your education. It wants those 5 companies want to dominate. So it's a grand battle being fought. Meanwhile, they have, before the pandemic, already mapped up this mindset of how do they get a footprint in a toehold into the business, into the customers and homes and in the B2B world. Then the pandemic hit, and they were very well positioned. You haven't seen them flinching. You haven't read tales of distress from those 5 companies. So could they take over? Could they make Eli Lilly sweat? Eli Lilly is, and these others are going to respond in kind. I mean, I look at a company like Eli Lilly or a company like, a manufacturer of tools like Bosch Tools, for example. They sell tools to the home professional as well as the professional. But how can they become more relevant to what goes on? And so it's going to come through product development. Bosch may have been a bad example because they also have Bosch appliances. They're actually pretty well positioned in a lot of ways. But I look at their appliance division, and beyond just adding a Wi-Fi, folks, adding Wi-Fi is not enough anymore. That's almost an expectation, right?
We have a great question here. Drew from DC is joining us, and welcome, Drew. The question around how critical it is to retain and delight customers. Can you talk about some examples of B2B companies that have built communities of customer evangelists?
Yeah, Drew, thank you. The one brand that I just enjoy a lot is it's a German brand, and it's Vera, or we spell it Wera. In German, you pronounce the W as a V, so Wera or Vera, and they make tools, and they have such a edgy, wonderful brand personality. They call themselves Tool Rebels, and they've built a community of people around their base. These are mechanics in the aviation industry, high critical engineering type people that use tools. So manufacturing engineers, aviation, automotive, things like that. And if you go to their website, it'll just blow you away. It's the Tool Rebels, and they have built this community of people that hold that same edginess, that see themselves as rebels. It's kind of the tool version of Harley Davidson, right? Be a rebel, be somewhat of a maverick, be off the beaten path.
Now, so they're selling to distributors and retailers, not just are they also DTC, direct to consumer now?
They go through all through distributors, but for their consumer business. But they have built strong B2B relationships with fleet. Anybody that has a fleet of any kind, or the kind of manufacturing footprint where they need these kind of high quality tools. These are hand tools like wrenches and things like that. But a better quality you'd have a hard time finding. I mean, these are truly, when we talk about prestige, these are prestige tools that deliver extreme performance.
Oh, that's interesting. All right. Well, I put the link to that website in the chat box in case anybody wants to follow Vera. And I think this is a great time to transition. Thank you, Drew, for your comments and questions. It's a great time to transition now to getting a common set of definitions on the word prestige and or luxury, because a lot of people I know only refer to luxury brands as consumer brands, Mercedes-Benz, Sonos, Restoration Hardware, the ones that are doing extremely well during the pandemic. But how do you, Drew Boyd, define prestige brands?
Sure. So what I've learned in writing this most recent book is the word luxury has many definitions, has very, very slippery topic, even among the greatest academics in the field and the luxury associations. They all have their different take on it. Everybody kind of knows luxury in their own mind, but when we think of luxury brands, I'm thinking of the ultra luxury like Gucci and Tiffany's and things like that. But what I firmly believe is that the B2B, the non-luxury world, can and should really adopt some of those same strategies as luxury brands to boost their prestige factor, to take themselves from where they are and add an element in their portfolio that brings their whole portfolio, kind of raises up the whole, all the boats in the harbor, so to speak. And some B2B companies have done this very well. Others are scratching their head and saying, wait a minute, I'm a discount provider of XYZ. I'm not going to add a prestige brand. And that's a shame, because they're missing the point. The point is that a prestige, even for the low bottom feeding player in an industry, and I'll looking around my office here, let's say, okay, so acoustic guitars, I make and play acoustic guitars and I collect. So you can buy a $25 acoustic guitar made overseas, $25. That's a bottom feeding player. But even with that lowly price point, they still could bring more value to that low price point if they had a marquee version of it. And so they have their $25 product, but even if they added one for $125, in the context of their price point, they could add something that communicates more value and makes that $25 guitar all of a sudden look a little bit better than maybe you would have thought of. It's a winning strategy.
It is a winning strategy. And I also want to follow up on what Drew is asking here by recommending you follow what Salesforce does with their branded customer communities. They have and I talk about this, by the way, in my latest course on Knowable, on how to build a professional community. And one of the areas of inspiration for me has been watching how Salesforce has built this branded customer community now that has over 1.2 million fans. And they've been doing this for about 8 years. They started with a few hundred. So within their customer community, which is a closed door online community where people share ideas, they then have another premier community within the community of something of like 200 members. And those members get all kinds of special badges and free admission to special events. And they've taken this gamification concept that you often see with fintech companies or D2C companies, and they've applied some of the best ideas in a B2B setting. So I would recommend also people get on the email list for salesforce.com.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. That's and it, it really is almost an expectation today of today's consumer. Why isn't there a club? I like this brand. I want to be part of you. And so today consumers give them that way to scratch that itch. So for example, I have a Panasonic camera, a high-end Panasonic 4K camera is my webcam now. It's their Lumix brand, Lumix. And Lumix, I've come to find, I'm not a professional photographer by any stretch of the imagination, but as I parachuted into this world of video and online and everything else, Panasonic has done a fabulous job of creating a hardcore group of loyal customers that take that camera to the highest levels of its capabilities and build that community of practice. It's so smart in terms of retention and acquisition and retention.
You have done an extensive amount of research for your latest book on prestige brands and adding prestige to your portfolio. What surprised you where maybe you had gone in with some preconceived concepts of what makes prestige brands great, that particularly since you also did some research during COVID?
Uh, what's true is that I'm not a luxury insider at all, and I plead that case very clearly in the intro to the book. I tell people, if you're looking for insights from a luxury insider, you're reading the wrong book. But I think being an outsider to the luxury industry had its advantages for me, because I could look at it through fresh eyes, through more of an outsider, and see things like, wow, you really do that. And what I think surprised me very much is that there is a well-defined code of luxury. There are triggers, I in my book I call them switches. You can switch on luxury, and that is gives you the way to take pretty much anything and throw the right switches, and all of a sudden you've upped the game in your product. That the luxury folks are sometimes sneered at as like, oh, you're just all about conspicuous consumption. Why would anybody want a $60,000 watch? Well, I would for for one, but that's another story.
For special occasions,
I'm
like
just stuck with my little Apple. Yeah, my Apple here. But what they're ignoring, the luxury outside, non-luxury, is that this is a very sophisticated industry of highly qualified managers that understand branding, they understand product development, maybe top in class. I mean, there's so much to learn from it, and this is for me the great takeaway. It's also surprising that how long luxury has been around with us, pretty much as long as we've been human. And the opening story of the book talks about the roots of luxury go back to the fact that humans are the only species on the planet that buries its dead. Now, and I won't tell the rest of the story, but it's fascinating that basically a luxury, think of a luxury item as a prestige item. Anything that's so prestigious to you, you would take to your grave with you.
Oh my gosh. I don't know.
Yep.
Probably.
I tell you what, you see this little thing here, this smartphone? People are putting these in their caskets now. They're taking them to the grave with them. I mean, so as a quick and dirty way to think about it, it's something you would theoretically take to the grave with you.
Wow. Yeah, that's incredible. I also would encourage people, if you want examples, get on some email lists of what these are Lisa's opinions. These are not based in any research, Drew. There are a few luxury brands that I think do a fine job. And look around your own home and say, are there things I have paid for as luxury brands to surround myself with just a little bit more comfort during COVID? So you could look at, did I upgrade my appliances did I get a Sub-Zero? Did I upgrade and buy some Sonos speakers? Did I do something in terms of beautiful luxury towels for the bathroom?
Right.
And those three things in themselves could be clues into how you could be a better marketer by following some of those luxury brand marketing strategies.
Yeah, and to make it easy for people, this is where I've really introduced strongly the idea of word prestige, because people hear luxury and it's immediate switch off. Luxury equates to evil or conspicuous consumption, bad habits. But prestige, to your point, Lisa, prestige, if you bring that a more prestigious set of towels to your family, that's much more acceptable, easier to swallow than if you were to say, I splurged on high-end luxury towels that you would find at the Ritz-Carlton. So it's a sort of a moderating word. It moderates some of the guilt, because all luxury has a certain amount of guilt to it, and prestige kind of takes a little of that guilt away and switches the guilt from guilt to I'm being responsible. That's really the mental accounting that people do when they balance those two words together, prestige versus luxury.
I do like the word prestige better. I think the word luxury right now can really come off as tone deaf. I do believe it. And I love the Wall Street Journal. I've been reading it for about 48 years. And my father taught me how to read the financial section when I was about 11. And I'm sure it had some influence on why I chose to go into business and why I love marketing so much.
Explains everything now.
Yeah,
It's
well,
all
now
coming
you
true.
guys know. I shared with you what I've paid thousands of dollars for my therapist to hear. But anyway, I digress. Um, I think this is a time to surround ourselves and focus on self-care. And if I'm spending 7 days a week, 22 hours a day in my home, it's okay to have surround myself with prestige food, prestige brands that give me that sense of comfort and safety.
Yeah.
So I'm fully a believer in that perspective right now, and I invite all of our viewers to look around and say, where can we as a brand get inspiration from similar brands or other brands just surrounding us in our homes?
I think when I think about the pandemic, and it has definitely changed people's routines. Some of the routines, not everything, but a lot of the routines, socializing, entertainment, things like that, and what it's also really made people scratch their head and start thinking about their sourcing. There's been an unfortunate, backlash to China specifically, but now consumers are looking at everything and go, where does this coaster come from? Who makes this pen? And that not that consideration of the source is a natural lead into the other questions, like, am I getting my money's worth? Is this the right quality? Am I getting the features I would? People want to be a little more self-serving, a little more selfish. They want to get products that are simple, adaptable, that really give them the quality feeling. There was so much paranoia about the pandemic, and everybody was afraid to just touch stuff. And now, so we're much more careful about what we buy and what we use, what we put in our bodies, on our skin, in our car, even our pets, right? The pet industry is booming, not just in volume, but people are upgrading their cat food. Yeah, so I mean, let's go ahead and get the premium cat. Yeah, but the Tabby is worth it, right?
Well, can we talk about tabbies for a minute?
Sure.
I believe there's also the opposite of that, which I coined the Muji mindset. And I know this is the part, Drew, where you say, "Aw."
Good lead in, Drew.
Yeah, we can't make this up. We do
I
not
couldn't make it. We didn't plan this. No,
we do not rehearse this, people. You're getting raw footage here. Muji is a very special cat. I just adopted
That's a cat?
him.
Oh.
Muji is my cat. He's been with me for a couple of months now. And I have to tell you a little bit about him because it's extremely relevant to what you're sharing here.
I'll take your word for it.
So when I adopted Muji, he's 2.5 years young. He has so much energy. All he wants to do all day is fetch. So somebody who adopted him before taught him to fetch like a dog. So I could not keep up with all his energy because I actually do have to work during the day. So what I first did, I immediately went to PetSmart and I purchased probably $200 worth of prestige toys and fancy battery operated laser, you name it, I bought it. I came home and I tested all the toys. And somehow he got into one of my cabinets and he pulled out a $1 package of pipe cleaners. Now, he cannot stop playing with the $1 package of pipe cleaners to play fetch. So this brings me to the conversation around prestige brands and the perception of value. So how many of us are out providing the fancy toys that our clients never really asked for and may not even want? Yeah. And yet we think that over delivering, constantly preparing too many presentations, sending out 75 emails a month, and that is a definition of prestige or value. What say you on that, Drew?
The book had me not just learn about the models of luxury, but I went back into the research and pulled forward some classic research about the consumer mindset, and that's in the book. So it's really a blend of models of structured creativity, models of luxury, models of consumer value, and so as it turns out, uh, all humans aspire to one of 8 universal values when they consume products and services. 8. That's it. That's all that defines us. And I'll try to rattle off all 8. I could look it up in the book here, but let's see if I can get most of it. It's something like fun and enjoyment, safety and security, respect from others, a sense of achievement, a impact, sense of belonging, right? Community, and they all center on this idea of the self being. We care about ourself, we care about our accomplishments, and we care about our connections to others. And I'm kind of imaginary drawing a wheel here because it was displayed very nicely by the original researchers in this wheel. And so the book teaches you how to take any product. I don't care what it is. I'll go back to my coaster. I just happen to have a coaster for my coffee here. How could you take that and ladder that up to one of those 8 values? And the best marketers are the ones that think this way. And the book teaches a set of very relevant tools, very easy to implement tools, how to take and make sure your connections are well thought out. If you do it consistently and you do it, and the prestige factor resonates not with all 8 of those necessarily, but when you want to bring prestige, you got to make sure you're pushing the right buttons again. It's back to switches and how you throw the switches of prestige.
Yes, and remember that those 8 drivers are available now in your new book, which I believe launches on January 26th. So that's just a couple of weeks away, and I think it's a great time. So Stefan can remind everybody how where to find your book, and we put the tiny URL there at the bottom.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Got to pre-order that. I think too that sense of belonging, and it is so important right now. One of the biggest drivers for my CMO clients to join our private CMO peer group is around eliminating or reducing isolation and the fear that my problems are unique and nobody else is facing these problems. Ergo, I have some big problems, and we help them realize they are not alone.
And this goes back to those routines. Some of those routines are new and fun. Some of those routines are sad and melancholy, like feeling of isolation. And you take people, for example, one of my clients has a treatment for peanut allergy, kids with peanut allergy. Peanut allergy not only is life-threatening, but it affects children in terms of they can't be normal kids and play with their friends the same way and go to school the same way. They're always on alert for being killed by peanuts, literally. So this company sells the only monotherapy treatment which you get over a series of weeks and months to build your immune system to peanut allergy. Everybody's worried about COVID. How would you like to know that your kid could die from peanuts? But these parents with peanut allergy children are feeling very isolated. And so the company that sells this drug has to relieve that and create this community. And that's exactly what it's trying to do now. Build a community of peanut allergy families that have this common problem and have outlets that is serving that business well as well. They're becoming the focal point for building that community, much like what you talked about with Salesforce. Every company ought to be looking at what is my community of practitioners. Lisa, you mentioned I teach. One of the first things I teach my student is this: be sure you know how many customers you have. Just just do a simple count. I'm amazed how many marketers don't know how many customers they have. And it doesn't matter if it's in the millions. You still have to have a pretty accurate number in mind what your customer count is, because that's where it starts. Think about how many customers you have and how do you reach them? How do you build that community around them and up your retention? Here we are back to retention.
Yes, it's all about retention, Drew. And I know with a few minutes remaining, I also want to explore with you some things your clients are doing when they do have limited marketing funds to do massive prestige marketing initiatives.
Yeah. The truth is you don't have to go out and do, especially if you don't have the funds, you're not going to go out and do massive prestige initiatives. I think what the book points out, and I agree with, completely agree with, is take your limited funds and start with the product or service and build into it higher levels of ingredients, higher levels of performance, higher levels of training around it to amp it up. One of my stories in the book is about a guy named Bob Kramer Knives. He's the most well-known, well-recognized master bladesmith in the world. And little old Bob, lives out in Portland, I think Portland or Seattle. And he makes knives that sell for $25,000 each. They're used by the greatest chefs in the world. Now, you talk to Bob and how do you take an ordinary kitchen knife and turn it into a prestige product? You don't do that by accident. You don't do that with a big ad campaign. You do that by making sure that product has the story behind it in terms of the way it's made, how it's made, who makes it. And that's one of the things the book talks about, how to take any product or service and build in a prestige factor. Start with the product or service first. And then once you have the story, then you're ready to start thinking about how to spend to lift the awareness and importance of it.
Yes. And by the way, I also want to I'm a bit of a provocateur here. What I'm about to say may sound antithetical, but I am not encouraging, especially since I have so many followers who are B2B companies, I am not suggesting that your homepage on your website suddenly becomes the history of our company and look at our beautiful corporate office building. And aren't we smart? We have PhDs. And aren't our people the best? I am not suggesting that you do that in your digital properties. But what I am suggesting you do is to learn from companies like, let's look at Samuel Hubbard shoes. I have heard from some pretty prestige brand friends who can afford to buy whatever they want, that the Samuel Hubbard shoes are not only some of the best shoes, but their website just draws you in. And they talk about where they source their felt for their shoes and the craftsmen and women that live in Portugal who make the shoes. I'm getting goosebumps right now because they're creating jobs. They're creating jobs and they're fulfilling an important need. Don't you wish more B2B companies had that kind of storytelling capability?
Yeah. It is about extracting that little nugget of that machine that you're so proud of and making it a big deal. And I use an example in some of my courses, a prestige brand, Acura, and car companies are pretty good at this, but Acura in particular, Mercedes-Benz too, but Acura had an ad several years ago that it talked about one of their new models. And what it did is it showed how much work they put into picking the LED bulbs that go into their dashboards. And they described the whole process just to pick LED bulbs. And the tagline of the ad, only the brightest and most stable LED bulbs get into the dashboard of the new XYZ model.
I love it.
And the message was clear. If we go to this trouble to build, pick these bulbs, imagine what the rest of the car is like.
Yes, I love that.
Yeah. And I don't care you name a product. I don't care if you're making caskets for dead people, or speaking of dead people, or you're making coasters, or you're making shoes. You have that opportunity, or software, exactly, and build in that great story.
I hate to tell you this, but we've come to the end of our session today. This is amazing.
This is fun.
We have shared examples from everything from Samuel Hubbard shoes to Salesforce to knives, kitchen knives, and you have cut to the core of what it means to have a prestige brand today, Drew. So
thanks,
I'm so thrilled you were with us. We have shared here in the show banners how people can connect with you and pre-order your book. And you've really opened my eyes to what it takes to be a prestige brand leader. And so thanks for being with us today, and much success with your new book. And please stay healthy. And I look forward to meeting you in person when we get past this pandemic.
Okay, great. Thanks, Lisa. All the best.
Take care. Well, my friends, we have come to the end of our session today to talk with you about how to be a mindful marketer and how to be more profitable post-pandemic. I trust that you found some great value from the session today. Please remember that you can join us here the first 3 Fridays of every month on LinkedIn Live, YouTube, and Facebook. If you had to run off and get your sandwich, remember our replays are available on my website at lisanirell.com/events. And in the meantime, our next session is coming up on January 22nd. How do you avoid isolation? How do you COVID-proof your career? How do you get feedback behind a screen when you can't meet somebody at the coffee machine? Well, we're going to talk about ways that top professionals, high-performing professionals, are COVID-proofing their careers by building community. So I hope you'll join us next Friday, January 22nd at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And until then, I hope you stay healthy, stay sane, and stay mindful. Bye, everybody.